How's it going, guys? That's another beautiful day here. You know, we're in October and it's still nice and warm out here during the day, although a bit chilly at night. But still diving weather. Um, I had someone ask me earlier. They're like, isn't diving expensive? Well, that's kind of a yes and no question. Um, Number one, what do you consider expensive? I mean, just look at any hobbies or activities people like to do. Diving is it might be more expensive than some, but cheaper than others. Um, Also, one of the things is how often are you planning on diving? That's Do you have to travel far to dive? There's a lot of factors involved in this. However, the best answer I can give you is this. Okay, if your initial startup, you're gonna have to pay for a course. Um, you're gonna have to pay for your personal gear. Personal gear being mask, fins, snorkels, boots. Um, and that's just pretty much basic right there. Now, let's say that you're only gonna dive when you go on vacation once a year. Okay, you buy your mask, fins, snorkel, and boots, and don't buy any other gear. Trust me, you're only gonna dive, say, 1 week out of the year. Say you're gonna take say a liveaboard, um, and you're just gonna dive once a year. You're gonna go on a cruise. You're gonna dive, one time a year. Don't buy your own gear. Buy your basic, items: mask, fins, snorkel, and boots. Or you might not even have boots, depending on what kind of fins you get. But anyway, and just have those, and rent your equipment. Now, if you plan on diving a lot, buy your gear. Because what happens is, all right, so one of the local places here to dive, full set of rental gear, it runs about $100 a day. Now that does not include, if I remember correctly, it does not include the mask, fin, snorkel, uh, fins, or boot. Um, Although I don't know. I just know that regulator, tank, BC, computer, and wetsuit, that's going to run you about $100 a day. Now, granted, you get on some of these liveaboards, you can probably rent it by the week, and it's probably like $50 a trip. Because the thing is, you get on a liveaboard, everybody that's on that boat, there ain't nobody getting on and off during the trip. So, most of the time it's cheaper to rent a set when you're going to be there a whole week in the same place. Um, so just food for thought right there. If you're planning on diving once a year, you don't buy your gear. If you plan on diving a lot, like uh, for example, for me to go dive, I can go dive somewhere locally, and it's going to cost me maybe $20 to get in the park, and then $10 a tank, and that's if I don't take my already filled tanks with me. Now, granted, I do have to get them filled after I'm done, and it costs about $10 per fill. So, you know, I can go spend all day and spend $50 and dive all day. Um, so, it's the cost is relative. Now I can go get on a boat, down in the Gulf, $150, and that's all day. I'm talking about starting at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, and we don't get off till 6, 7 at night. And that includes all my tanks. So your cost is relative. Now there's a lot of other stuff you can't go down to the Gulf and do $150 to take care of you all day long. Um, but again, I have my own gear. Now if I had to rent my gear, no, it'd be a little pricier than that. Now how much pricier? I don't know. Now let's talk about tanks. Um, I would not buy tanks. I have tanks now. Um, I have the first tank I bought. I was actually kind of hustled into buying. You know, I was young, stupid, didn't even have a regulator or a BC. And somebody said, "Oh man, you need to have it. You need to have it." And I bought it. And I didn't pay much for it. It was a used one, and I still have it. It's still good. There's nothing wrong with it. But and then I had three more tanks that a guy just gave me. He just said, "Here, you can have them." Okay, I'll take them. And then I have a pony bottle to go with my rebreather, and then I have um, two big steel tanks that I actually kind of want to sort of want to get rid of, but not really want to get rid of. But anyway, the point is I got them specifically to do side mount with. Um, but the problem with tanks are you have upkeep. You have to pay. You know, you have to pay for them to be visually inspected every single year. Then you have to pay for them every 5 years, or here it's every 5 years. Um, you have to pay to have them hydro tested to make sure that they're still safe, for the pressure. Um, and that's a you got to do it. Now, if they run out of hydro date, not a big deal. Whatever, you just can't use it till you get it, tested. But anyway, um, and then when you go to travel with them, it's terrible. Do yourself a favor, skip out on tanks unless you're going to be into tech stuff, or you're going to be going to a lot of places, rural areas diving. Like, for example, if I'm going to dive in this lake over here behind me, number one, diving in the lake sucks because you can't see anything. You're going to be feeling around for everything. Some people like that black water diving. I do not enjoy it. I enjoy seeing things. So black water diving sucks. But if I was going to dive in this lake right here, the closest place to get a tank fill, you're looking 50, 60 miles. If you if you're not going to be going anywhere close to a dive shop, on a regular basis, or a place to get the tank filled on a regular basis, but you're going to do a lot of diving in rural areas, then yeah, buy you some tanks. But I mean, if most of your diving is going to be on the coast, or in a dive park, maybe in someplace like that, usually there's going to be a lot of dive shops close by that you can rent the tanks. It's not a big deal. Um, so, but for the most part, for the average person, don't buy the tanks. And in fact, you can literally you can look online and people are pretty much giving them away. They're like, come get them to get them out of their way. Um, so tanks, forget it. All right, when you talk about BCs, um, especially if you do a lot of especially if you do a lot of traveling. If you do a lot of traveling, you might just want to just use whatever BC that you can rent, just because it is a fairly large piece of gear. It's not super super heavy, but it's kind of bulky. It takes up a lot of space in a bag. So maybe you don't want to carry a BC everywhere you go. I know, the last when I went to um, Utila last, I carried all my gear, and I wish I'd left my BC. I wish I just rented one when I got there because it was just so much to take. I mean, I was there for 3 weeks, um, so all my dive gear, and then clothes and all that. It was a lot. I wish I'd left that out. Um, but at the same time, if you're just in love with your BC, by all means, take one. But there are a lot of good travel BCs that pack up small and are really light. Um, the biggest thing, wetsuits. If you're going somewhere tropical, if you're from somewhere like I am, in the United States, outside of like southern Florida. I say southern Florida, not northern Florida, because it gets cool in northern Florida. Um, unless you're somewhere where it just doesn't get cold, um, you know, if you're going to fly somewhere tropical, you probably do not need a wetsuit. And when I say tropical, I mean like down around the equator, not the Bahamas. The Bahamas, I went diving in the Bahamas in the middle of February, and wearing a 3-2 wetsuit, and it was cold. I mean, you did get cold. Um, so you know, you most time, unless you don't really need a wetsuit too much. The biggest piece of gear that I am pretty anal about when it comes to I want mine is my regulator. I am very much I want my regulator. I'm not going to rent a regulator anywhere I go. I want mine, um, and that goes right along with my computer. I want my regulator in my computer. I have my setup. I like my setup. Um, I can trade out the BC. I can trade out. I can just not wear a wetsuit. I'm okay with that. But the regulator, I do like mine. Now again, if you're somebody who you use rental gear when you got certified, you probably used one of the lower end regulators, regardless of brand. You probably used a low end regulator, and that regulator probably didn't breathe fantastic. If you ever used one of the higher end regulators, um, you find out how much easier to breathe, and then you're like you never want to go back, um, because they're just as easy, sometimes easier than breathing just sitting up here on the surface. So you get kind of pampered, uh, to that really good breathing regulator. You refuse to use rental gear when it comes to regulators. Um, and then again, I have I have the my Shearwater dial computers. I know how they work. They're easy for me to use. Now, if you were to hand me, you know, any number of other brands, any of the Cressy dive computers, or an Atmos, which is, I'm not saying an Atmos is a bad computer, but I don't I don't dive with an Atmos, so I don't know how they work. Um, so even if you gave me a high end computer outside of what I'm used to, I'm just kind of clueless. So I want my dive computer, I want my regulator. So, but some people, they don't care. Um, when I went and did my instructor's development course, there were some people there that they didn't bring anything. I mean, there were seriously some people that literally brought nothing, no dive gear at all. So they were all using rental gear, computers, fins, master, everything. And to be honest with you, I kind of wish that I'd used pretty much done the same thing, only taken my regulator and my fins and my mask and borrowed everything else. But again, that's kind of a personal preference right there. But I still, I'm still gonna say pretty much if you're gonna get into diving, if you're planning on diving once a year just on vacation, don't buy your gear. When you buy a regulator, there is upkeep on a regulator. You got to pay to have them serviced every 2 years. Some manufacturers say every year, but I think pretty much all of them have gone to service every 2 years. But other than that, nothing else really needs servicing. They say service your BCDs. I don't know anybody that's ever serviced a BCD outside of if it was damaged in some way. Um, and the only person I know of that had one that was damaged was one that was like 40 years old, and it needed a new valve because the valve was leaking. Again, that's BCs are pretty easy to handle. Um, but I guess that's really about it. As far as all the gear, talking about that. Um, if y'all have any questions about any other kind of gear, or questions about any of this, or maybe you want to know about, how much you should be looking to spend for this or that, you know, let me know. Let me know down in the comments below. Um, and if you want to see more content like this, hit that notification button. I think it's on this side. Or is it over on this side? And, make sure you like and subscribe. Thanks, guys.